This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. If you're writing anything this fall, check out my upcoming workshops all about getting that backstory woven into your now story, making sure your dramatic stakes and tension are effectively affecting your reader, and pulling your theme together with your plot and your character arcs. Go to wordessential.com/events to sign up today. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn and I are talking about revision. This is a mindset episode, a shorter episode where we just want to ponder this idea of revision a little bit, because the word can come with some baggage.
Oh my gosh.
So much baggage.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
So why is it problematic, Kathryn?
Oh, well, I have this problem with revision where I start panicking and getting into overwhelm mode. I don't understand how to do revision. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to look at my book? How am I supposed to change this or change that? And it starts feeling like this whole new project. Like I've written the draft and now I have to revise. Like it's two things. And lately I've been kind of having a better mindset shift about what that is. And I wanted to come on here and talk about it because I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's had this issue, this overwhelm around revision and around what that means in terms of writing. I can write it, but I can't revise it. Kind of a problem.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, especially saying that we tend to think of it as it can start to feel like two separate projects.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in revisions now. Oh, right. But revision just means to look at it and alter it as needed.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, there's the idea of revising, rewriting. Sometimes you need to see it anew, like lowercase r-e and then capital V,
Right,
revision,
exactly.
to really. So the approach we take with our work really depends on what the work needs. But all it means is that we're looking at something we've written, considering it, seeing what's there, seeing what isn't there, opening our eyes to all the possibilities on the page, strengths and weaknesses, and then adjusting the text.
Right, exactly. And I feel like where a lot of this disconnect came from me is I would feel like I studied character or I studied plot or I studied narrative or I studied dialogue. And then I drafted the book. And then I felt like there had to be something else I needed to study in order to revise it. And I didn't really connect the dots that I already had studied the character arc and the plot and the dialogue and the narrative, and that all I needed to do. And I really needed to simplify it for myself. All I needed to do is go into the words I had already written and find the character and find the plot and find the dialogue and find the narrative and make sure they did what I wanted them to do. And I feel like I had to break it down to that simple of a building block of I already know this. It's just sure it's there in order to get over that hurdle in my own brain. It's not, however many pages of rewriting or changing everything. It's literally, let's go find the dialogue and make sure it says what I said.
Right.
Let's find the character arc and make sure she develops.
Yes.
Let's go find the plot and make sure she goes from point A to point B,
Yeah, there is no school of revision.
No.
And
which sounds so stupid to say, but my brain was there for a long time. I even bought a course on how to revise with a checklist and everything. And I was going through it I already know this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right. I think people can get to the end of a draft and then they start realizing how many things need to be fixed and it feels overwhelming. And because it feels overwhelming, they want the magic process. What do the pros do?
Right.
What do the bestsellers or the masters do? how do I handle all of these changes? Because they don't want to start over and they don't want to deconstruct everything and reconstruct it all. And, what you say is so true that you're just looking at what's there, using the knowledge you already have, not only about writing, but about your story, right?
Sorry, I have
Yes.
a fly like buzzing around me.
I know. Fly in the studio. I saw it land on your microphone and I was like, this is interesting.
They're
Okay.
all over outside. Sorry. They get
I have
in,
a little.
I smack them.
Oh, no, I get it. I have a dog. The dog goes in and out. The flies go in and out.
Right.
Yes.
And then you wage war constantly. Anyway,
Yes.
continue.
So no, this just reminded me. I have a fly story.
Okay.
My total tangent, not related to writing. My Nana, so my father's mother, was a teacher. That was her career. And she was teaching kindergarten. And she was standing up in front of all these little 5 and 6-year-olds speaking, teaching. And a fly was in the classroom and it buzzed zoop right into her mouth. Like it just went shoot right to the back of her mouth. And she swallowed it. Like she didn't mean to. It just happened. But it just made her sick.
And then did she invent the song There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly? I don't know why she swallowed the fly.
I don't know, but maybe she had the children sing it after that. Or maybe she excused herself to go,
Oh gosh, right, I know.
I know.
Pack a lung because you can feel it in the back of your throat. Anyway.
Yes. Yeah. So sorry, listeners, but there was a fly on Kathryn's microphone right beneath her mouth. And
I know, right?
So
Alida was worried for my safety.
I was very worried that we were going to be singing There Was a Kathryn Who Swallowed a Fly. And
yeah, I know, right?
I know.
By the time I swallowed the horse, I'd be dead. So sorry. I think that children's song is ridiculous, but it's awesome. Anyway, continuing.
As they are. So revision, magic bullet process, overwhelm. Yeah. What else?
I've been watching one of the gals in my writing group tackle her writing project, and it's kind of been an inspiration for me lately. She just has so much enthusiasm for it, and sometimes I don't. And we talked about this in the feedback episode. Like I sometimes don't take criticism very well. I have to really sit with it and like let it work through, and then I can kind of get to a point where I'm okay. I know what I need to do and do it. She doesn't do that. She just tackles things head on. She's just like, let's go. And so I've been, giving her a lot of feedback, and I'll be like, okay, like for instance, we had to work on character agency for a while, and she just straight up revised for character agency. And I was like, what do you mean? You just revised for character agency? And that sort of light bulb triggered for me, like, oh, she just picked something and revised for it.
Mm-hmm.
She looked specifically for those moments, and that's all she revised for in that draft. But because she did that, so much else was changed that made it a better story, right? And she did have to do a lot of rewriting, and she did have to do a lot of retooling, and she did have to write whole new chapters, and it was a big project, and it took her months, right? But what she was focused on was the character agency. And now in this next draft, she's focused on setting and description. And that's just what she's doing. She's just like, this is what all my feedback notes are really kind of focused in this direction. So that's where I'm going. And I was like, dude, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get so big picture that I lose track of, I can just do this thing.
Right.
One thing that I already know and that I'm already capable of and that I already, can see. And that will change the whole story in a positive way. And I feel like sometimes in revision that doesn't get communicated. Like people just say, oh, I revised it.
Fall means back to school. And even if you haven't been a student for ages, it is the perfect time to grab a pencil and hone your storycraft skills. I've got new workshops and group coaching sessions open for enrollment now at wordessential.com. Right, like it's a one and done.
Right.
When people look for the solution or the process, generally the advice is just to do what you just described. Just pick something and go through the manuscript and fix that one thing, or you could do that one thing for a chapter and then do something else for that chapter and move ahead. And it's really, what are you most suited to do, your creative process and the way your mind works. And so if you have a little bit of self-awareness, you can figure that out. When I edit manuscripts for people, they get thousands of inline annotations, and then they get paragraphs, multiple paragraphs at the end of chapters, and then they get like a 8 to 10 page document at the end giving the global concerns. And one of the first note I always give them, especially if it's their first time working with me, is that this looks like a lot. I know it can be overwhelming, but I want you to think of this like dominoes or nesting dolls, So if you've got an issue like character agency and you've got issues with your plot, fix the character agency, because so many of your plot issues are going to be fixed by giving your protagonist choices that result in consequences, right? And so then when you look at these pages and pages of notes and it looks like you've got 50 problems to fix, you probably have 3 to 5 big problems. Yeah. And so many of those smaller things just get resolved in doing the pass for, the 3 things or the 3 passes for one thing each time.
Yeah. And I did this on a smaller scale just recently. I think I talked a little bit about it when I was talking about transitions, where I didn't want to go into Act 3 yet because I knew I needed to fix a few things in the first, 2-3 quarters of the book or whatever. And I went through and I just fixed world building continuity. That was it. But that also wasn't all I fixed because I was reading it. I was reading it, looking for these things. And I got done with that pass and I didn't feel like it was that big of a deal. And I feel like that was a big step forward for me as a writer, where I was able to do that without feeling like I had to rewrite the whole thing, or I had to sit there with a blank document on one side and the other document on the other side and kind of retype it. Because previously that's kind of how my brain has worked, is that, well, if I have to fix it, I have to fix everything. And I realized, no. And so again, this is why I wanted to talk about it, because I feel like I've been doing this for so many years. And I've revised a lot of things, but never with this kind of mindset shift where it makes it feel easier, more doable, like I'm capable of actually fixing it, rather than the next draft just has different problems. Right. And I just feel like that's discouraging, because I felt like, oh man, I worked so hard to fix that. And now I just have different problems and I have to do it again. Whereas if you take it more in layers, like you're saying, let's look at agency and then let's look at plot. And then, and then you start saying, okay, I did a pass. It doesn't feel like I did it. Didn't I?
Right. Well, and, as you were speaking, I was thinking too, one of the other things I do for my writers in their notes is I will lay out priorities for them and say, this is what I see as the biggest problem in your manuscript, right? And it's at the global level. So it's got lots of, tentacles in all the chapters, or it's got lots of nesting dolls within it. I don't know, I'm mixing my metaphors. But yeah, so if you can, if you look at your manuscript like you're a more experienced writer, and you can look at your manuscript and assess your problems, before you go into revision, step back and do some prioritizing. Which problem at the global level is going to have the most things that fall under it that will kind of smooth out or be resolved if I work on this problem, and get those top 3 to 5 items prioritized, instead of just randomly saying, well, today I feel like working on this. With the agency problem and the plot hole problem, if you do the plot holes first but don't solve for agency, right, it's the cart before the horse. And so if you don't feel experienced enough to do that for yourself, or, whatever, then use your peers, use your readers, not your beta readers, but writers,
Yeah.
people with experience, your critique group, or work with an editor, work with somebody who can give you that feedback.
Absolutely.
So that your revision process becomes more manageable and more streamlined.
Yes. And I think comes down to knowing yourself a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been writing for far too long for this to be a new thing for me to be realizing, but I think everything comes in waves, like you grow in circular patterns. But
Right.
I should have known this about myself, and I didn't. That I'm a teacher. That's just what I am. And so when I got into a writing group situation with people who did not have the same level of experience as me, but had a different emotional maturity, right, about their writing, that me helping them helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because that's one of the best ways that I learn. And I should have known this. I've done it my whole life. I used to tutor people in high school so that I could learn Spanish. I used to tutor people in college so that I would understand the material better. Like that was just what I did. And it's like having that back and forth. I needed to know myself. I needed to realize that I can have all the experience in the world, but if I don't have the right perspective or the right way of approaching it, it's not going to work for me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so this finding the right people to work with, finding the way that your brain functions, because everybody's going to come at it a little bit differently. And yeah, I needed to have that realization this last year or so, where I also think I've grown in maturity as a writer, where I'm a little more able to say like, this is just work and I'm going to make it work. And
Right.
buckle down a little bit more rather than like chasing the next shiny thing. But it's like, finding those things where growth happens is, it's not always when you think, it's like, oh man, how long have I been doing this for? And I'm still having this. Well, of course, you're still going to have new things or ways of working that change or whatnot.
Well, and thank goodness, because that keeps it interesting.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
if we
there
just
is
like
that
learned
too.
it and that was that, and we did it and we were done, it would get
be done.
dull.
Yeah. You'd be
Yes, we
done.
need to keep making discoveries. Definitely.
Iterating, changing what you're doing and growing as a person, as a writer, as a friend, as a critique partner.
Yes.
All those things.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So have we solved the revision mindset problem?
For this book.
For this book, excellent.
We'll see what happens next time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think this is a great thing to bring up because you're right. It does look overwhelming, especially you go through the process of writing your book, getting to the end of that first draft, and everyone says, okay, you get to go celebrate now. Right. But then you come back the next morning to the keyboard and it's like, oh no.
And I've never really understood that because I always got to the end of a first draft and I could see all the pitfalls and all the holes and all the problems. And that was where I got overwhelmed. And so I can't wait to actually celebrate where I feel like I can hit done. And whether, it's going to be art done, right? Like I just decide it's done, but where I actually feel like I've done that process. I've made it through, the passes and the drafts and the problems that I see and there's critique from my partners and things. And that's where I'm excited to hit the done and actually go celebrate.
Yes. Well, the day is coming.
It will. It'll come. I'm keeping the faith, guys. You can keep it with me.
My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.